Okay, so I'm here today with Francesca Zampolo, and which, of course, the name sounds a little bit Italian, so she will tell us more about her Italian heritage. But I'm very happy to have you here with us, Francesca, and thank you for accepting the invitation. Why don't you introduce yourself and then we can start together.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely Italian. Also, what I like also to say sometimes is that I am very much stereotypically Italian because I love pizza. It's like pizza is like, you know, like seriously one of the reasons why I live. So it's like very stereotypically Italian in that sense. Thank you for having me here, Alfredo. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here and to have the possibility to share what I do and what I've been thinking about for the past, I guess, 18 years. Because so I'll start giving you a little bit of background. I have my first degree is in industrial design. I took it at I got it at Polytechnic of Turin, and it was, I think, during my second year that I did like an elective workshop. And the workshop was like 1 week in between semesters. And I just chose the one with the least boring name. And the first day of this workshop, a chef came in who turned out to be Chef Davide Scabin, 2 Michelin star restaurant with his restaurant Comba Zero. A chef came in, you know, we were designing washing machines and air conditioning and stuff like that. And all of a sudden we have a chef. He was dressed like a chef. And he started saying that you can design with food. And my mind was completely blown by the fact that instead of designing with wood, steel, plastic, or whatever, I could design with food, a material that disappears, basically. And so in that moment, my life took a 90-degree turn, and the rest of my working career, research career, and really passion for my life was decided. And I think that what really fascinated me about this discipline that then I discovered being, you know, food design, is the fact that I realized that, you know, architects, when they design something that can last for hundreds of years easily. Product designers, I don't know, even just a fashion designer could design something that lasts for years, decades. And food designers, or at least those designing with the food itself, with the edible material, design stuff that could last minutes, literally. And so what was the key point that determined me going into the other degrees that I got and the other, you know, learning and research that I've done was the fact that as food designers, we are not really designing products because those disappear, but we are designing for memories. And so then my following studies and my research became brilliant. Now, how can I help food designers design stuff that is actually remembered and not forgotten? Most of the food that we eat, we forget about, but when we design something, we want to design something that is meaningful, that has an impact. So how do we design something that is remembered? I, you know, as many other enthusiastic Italian young graduates, I went to London to do my master. I ended up doing my PhD there as well. And in that research, in that continuation of my understanding of the field and the deepening of it through my personal research, I found that I was interested more into design theory applied to food design, and specifically the creative process. How do food designers design? What's the difference between how designers design and food designers design, etc. And throughout those years, I think I did a couple of things that helped the discipline kind of become what it is today a little bit. I don't want to sound too vain, but I think I really did, because this was like 18 years ago, or 20 years ago. There was this buzzword food design, but then you would Google it, and it was completely confusing for me because everything was the opposite of everything. And a dish by a restaurant was called food design, as well as a plate, as well as a whole restaurant or a chair in a restaurant was called food design. And to me, it was confusing to understand how different people with different backgrounds, you know, chefs, product designers, can do things for the same discipline. So what I started doing at the beginning was to try and figure out for myself first what food design actually is. And I ended up creating a few different iteration of what food design is and visualization of what it is. And it ended up being useful to other people also, quite a few other people also later on in the years. And so the last visualization that I've created, I've called it Food Design 2.0, which is for myself, my own Food Design 2.0 definition. And you can find it on YouTube and on my website. But so that's one of the things that I did. And then because I was into that kind of understanding what the discipline really is about, and because I was very much involved in academia, I was one of the people who said, oh my God, there's nobody doing an academic journal on food design. There's nobody doing an academic conference on food design, because the discipline was still fresh, even though the discipline is as old as human being. I mean, the first time we put a piece of steak on a fire, we were food designing, right? But the fancy term food design was still kind of new. So I remember somebody telling me, why don't you do it? And it was like, what do you mean? I'm just a student. What? And then it became, why don't I do it? So in 2009, I founded the International Food Design Society, which is no longer with us anymore. Then I created the first symposium on food design, and then organized the first, second, and third international academic conference on food design. And probably my biggest achievement, I founded the International Journal of Food Design, which is still today the first and only academic journal on food science. And in this sense, I've done a few things for the discipline. Continued my studies, taught in university, design thinking and food design, and then went to New Zealand, of all the places. I guess I was looking for the place further away from Italy where I could spread a little bit of my own contribution. No, it just happened. I just applied to a bunch of jobs and that one opened up. And so I went there, I taught there. And then in 2015, I decided to live a full-time academic life because I realized I wasn't designed for it. Like all jobs, you need to be the right person for it. And I wanted to pursue more of an independent career, I guess. So I started dedicating more time to consultancy and public speaking. And I founded the Online School of Food Design, which is this place where education on food design, that's my intent at least, is readily available and affordable to anybody or most people around the world. Because the alternatives still at the moment are university courses, whether masters or bachelors, but not everybody has that amount of time to invest and that amount of money to invest. So that's it. That's what I'm doing right now. Still, I'm working at the school that since last year has become actually a collaborative effort between myself and Food Design Nation. And we offer a whole bunch of courses, whereas previously it was just my courses. Since last year, the school offers courses from different authors, different food designers all around the world. And we just launched a 10-month program called Rebuilding Resilient Food Systems. We're quite excited about. And I work as a consultant, as a public speaker, and I have fun with people as amazing as Alfredo.
Besides, I think my last question would be, how is pizza in New Zealand? But we can get there later. But we met physically quite recently through a common friend who's indeed a chef. And the work we did together was I was fascinated by the way you've put together food design and design thinking, and really thinking and in the food industry, how you define and finds your vision. What is the intent besides, cooking something? So I think there's one aspect that you talked about briefly, which is food design. Yeah, I guess it's the plate, how the plate shows up on the table, to make it very simple. But on the other side, I'm very interested in what is, especially nowadays, I think clarifying your intents besides food business, it's quite interesting and probably relevant, given the situation we're living with, all the climate change situation and so on. What are you doing stuff in that field? What is your experience in that?
That being what specifically? You mentioned a couple of things.
Well, the design, using food design and food design thinking to define your own vision as a food producer, I would say.
Okay, so I'm not a food producer myself. I just tell people how to do things. But in that sense, I always quite struggle to call myself a designer, but I'm more of a design thinker, I guess. So I guess a couple of things that I want to say. First is about food design, which I'm taking for granted the definition of food design, but it might be worth mentioning what food design actually is to give a sense to what I can say later on about food design thinking, to give a structure to our conversation. And what I'm going to say is what I referred earlier to as my vision for what food design is, that I call food design 0.0, and you can find the whole thing, the full description, and I have a 30 minutes videos if you're into that on my YouTube channel, etc. So what food design is, most people, even in design, think the first thing that they tell you, oh, is how you put food on the plate. Yes and no, or definitely more than that. When we talk about food design, we talk about any place or any outcome where design is applied to food or the act of eating. So we can have from food product design, manufacture food products, edible food product. We can have design for food, design of packaging, pots and pans, anything to cook, contain, transport, transform food. And then we have design with food, which is the design of the food itself, texture, colors, etc. This was chefs and food scientists to design with food. And then we have eating design, which is the design of the eating situation. This is what most event designers do or caterers do. So you get to design an eating situation, and therefore you get to design the food itself, the vessel, plates and cutlery, etc., the space, lighting, sounds, etc. Then you have food service design, and there you're designing the whole food service, you're designing the whole restaurant, the whole food truck, the whole cafe, whatever it is. And then you have food system design. You can be a food designer if you are designing the whole food system, or most likely intervening, designing an intervention in a set food system. And then we also have what we call critical food design, which is critical design, but about food. So critical design, also called speculative design, or critical food design, or speculative food design, doesn't have really often the goal of producing something or selling something, but more the goal of making people think about any topics that are thought relevant by the designer. And then finally, sustainable food design, which to me is not really a food design sub-discipline like the others, but should be simply a state of mind or a lens through which design anything. So whether you design systems, services, events, products, or what else, we should do it aiming at the best possible scenario in terms of economic sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. So this is how I view food design. Any place where design innovation is applied to anything about food or the act of eating. So we go from, agriculture, preparation, preservation, production, disposal of food, consumption, etc., the whole of the chain. Now, when it comes to food design thinking, on the other hand, so that's what I ended up creating with the results of my research. As I mentioned earlier, after my first degree, I became interested more in design theory and more in the creative process. For me, it was interesting to see how do designers design, how do food designers design, and how can I help food designers design stuff that is remembered, as I mentioned earlier. The key point there for me became to design something that is meaningful. if we design products that are meaningful for people, that mean something, that trigger certain values and emotions, then it's more likely to be remembered. So how do we design for meaningful situations or experiences? In doing that, my personal creative outcome became designing design methods. I became a designer of design methods, which is kind of a mind game for some people, but that's actually, you know, what happens. Because my interest was in food design specifically, very simple, it became clear to me that you can use regular generic design thinking to design food as well. Nothing wrong with that. But if you use a food specific design thinking process,